This is the 19th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, X Zone Lures, Shoreline Boat and RV Repair, Spro, Gamakatsu, Big Bite Baits, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. And yes, it is time for another edition of the Bassmaster Open Elite Qualifier, the Bassmaster Open EQ tournament breakdown, this time from the recently concluded Bugs Island or Kerr Reservoir in Virginia. And as always, we will be joined with, well, at this point, I think you could say it, the man, the myth, and the legend, none other than Ben Milliken, who had a good event at Bugs Island, all things considered, and did fall to 5th in the EQ standing. So we'll talk to see if he's feeling the pressure, if he's I don't think he feels pressure. I really don't. I think he's 3 tournaments in, but we'll talk to Ben. I know Ben was working on getting some stuff together with his truck. We have a very quick turnaround. Practice starts this Saturday on Wheeler Lake for the 4th Open EQ. So big shout out to Ben for jumping on. Before we get to Ben, though, we are approaching that kind of midway part of the season. And I'm a stats guy. If you follow BTL, you watch BTL, you know I'm a stats guy. And I have 3 things that have been bugging me. No, not bugging me, but 3 things that have stood out to me about the 2023 season so far. So we're going to get into that right now to kick things off. The first thing that I would like to point out is how drastically underrated Ron Nelson is in the MLF Invitationals, formerly the FLW Tour, formerly the Pro Circuit. Now, Ron's an understated guy. He's not I don't think he's even very active on social media, YouTube channel and stuff. But all this dude does is go out and catch fish, and it hasn't been talked about enough. There are 4 tournaments through the 6 tournament season on the MLF Invitationals. The top 8 in the Invitational Angler of the Year standings move on to fish in the BPT next year. Right now, Ron Nelson is leading. BTL favorite Matt Steffen, Martin Villa, Gray Buck, Michael Neal, Keith Carson, Cody Schrumpf, Dakota Eber round out the top 8. So I believe they go down the list of BPT qualifiers. So you've got Eber and Michael Neal in there as well. So right now there's only 6. But Ron Nelson has lucky number 7, 777 Angler of the Year points right now. This year he has finishes of 15th, 4th, 3rd, and 5th. We're talking about a 150 boat field on this. If you go back to the previous 4 years that Ron Nelson has competed in the MLF Invitationals, he has finishes in the Angler of the Year of 9th. He was the Angler, he won Angler of the Year 3 years ago. 1st, 13th, 20th, and he's 1st now. There's only 6 tournaments in that season. 1 year there was 7. He has 9 top 10s in MLF Invitationals in 4.5 year spans. 36% of the time since he started fishing the Invitationals, the man walks away with a top 10 and is approaching $750,000 in earnings, part of which is because he has 3 Toyota Series victories. But every time he launches his boat, roughly $8,000. He's got a 42-point lead going to the Potomac and the Mississippi River. Rod Nelson, I don't want to say he's a lock for Angler of the Year, but man, if history repeats itself and he continues on that trend, Rod Nelson's going to be a tough man to beat. Also, we'll get Matt Steffen on in the near future, having a great year for him, working towards his goal of qualifying for the BPT. Also want to jump over to the Bassmaster Elite Series. They are getting ready for the 5th tournament of the season on Lay Lake. Halfway through this event will be the halfway point of the year for the Elite Series. And dude, it's a very interesting year on the Elite Series. And I say that because if you were to go to the top 10 Angler of the Year finishers in 2022, when Brandon Polinick won his second Angler of the Year. There are currently only 2 anglers in the top 10 now that finished in the top 10 last year. And the top 10 AOY finishers from last year have combined, their average finish right now is a 34th place. So if you were in the top 10 last year, with the exception of Drew Benton, who's currently in 4th, and John Cox, who's currently in 8th, they both finished inside the top 10 last year. All the rest of the guys fighting for a classic spot. I thought that was very interesting. Some notables that have to really pick it up this year. Zaldane was 9th last year. He's in 62nd or 67th right now. With 5 events left. Lester was 2nd last year. He's in 62nd. Jason Christie coming up on a Bassmaster Classic, back on his home pond at Grand Lake. You want to talk about getting some redemption on Hartwell? I think he wants some redemption on Grand as well. He's in 61st currently. He was in 22nd last year. Seth Feider, previous Angler of the Year, he's currently in 59th, and Gerald Swindle's in 53rd. He finished 11th last year. All right. I also have some stats on Big Bass, but when you got Ben Milliken backstage, you got to bring Ben in before you can talk about some Big Bass stats. Ben, hopefully you got everything taken care of at the truck. Thanks for jumping on BTL Bugs Island recap. Really looking forward to this one.
What's up, Matt? Thanks for having me on. This one's not quite as exciting for me.
No, it's more exciting. It's more exciting than the previous 2, because this is a grinder. This was the tournament where everybody said, well, let's see what it's like when there's no ledges and when Ben can't throw the big bait and get offshore in prime time on Eufaula in Alabama and Toledo Bend. So to me, it's more exciting, and I'm really looking forward to getting into how it went down for you.
Heck yeah, man. I mean, as much as I do love to fish like I was able to at Eufaula and Toledo, like, grinding is pretty much what I got to do every day to make content. And being from Nebraska and fishing there, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, like, that's the way I fished really was how I fished a lot growing up in tournaments. So it wasn't anything too crazy.
All right, we will spend the majority of the show talking about that, but I do have to talk about the Big Bass. I had Edwin Evers on the show yesterday. We obviously brought up Scott Martin's post. He fished the Roland Martin Marine Center Tournament Series. There were 30, or I think there were 30 bags? 20 bags over 30 pounds. Took mid-30s to win. Absolutely insane event there on Okeechobee. Did you see that? Did that make you want to drive down to Florida?
I did see that. Yeah, that was cool to see all those big bags. But no, I don't have any desire to go over there. There's bigger ones here.
It's funny you should mention that, because obviously we didn't have any pre-tournament meeting, but I was perusing Instagram and I saw Jody White, who does a hell of a job over there at MLF, writing, historian, videographer, photographer. He does it all. I'm sure you know Jody White. He goes, I think, by Jody Blanco. And he said it was nice to see people pointing out that it was not the all-time world record for over 30-pound bags in tournaments. Scott Martin maybe got a little bit excited, which I would too if I was fishing with my kid and busted a 28, 29-pound bag and came in to the marina that my dad was named after on the lake that the family's synonymous with and is made famous. But, you know, Scott said Lake Okeechobee just shattered the all-time world record for bags over 30 pounds, 20 bags over 30 pounds today. And it did kind of click in my mind, like, boy, that'd be a real tough stat to go back and kind of find. But then I remembered there's a tournament trail called Bass Champs down in Texas. And Bass Champs likes to go to a little pond called Falcon. And Falcon, a 6-pounder is like a 2-pounder everywhere, specifically for about an 8 to 10 year time period when that lake exploded. Did you ever happen to get down to Falcon during its heyday?
No, man. I wish I could have. We've been there a couple times the last few years. It's totally different now. It's a shell of its former self. I don't even know. It's not even a top probably 20 or 30 fishery in Texas now.
Really? I thought it was kind of coming back.
I mean, there's always like some decent 30 to 40 pound bags caught in the middle of summer and then in the middle of winter when they start getting on some of that offshore stuff. But besides that, it's a lot different. If there was an Elite Series tournament there now, I'm sure there'd be a couple 30-pound bags throughout the tournament, but I don't even think there'd be a century boat. I mean, not that that's like a poor accomplishment, but I think it would take 85 to 90 pounds to win, probably.
Still strong, though.
Yeah, definitely.
So I did some research, and listen, I know I'll get in my DMs. Hey, there was a tournament that had more 30-pound bags, or there was one that was more recent or whatever. But Jody got me just that post that he posted on his Instagram. Got me thinking, well, I wonder if I can go back and find the archives. And I found a tournament for January, and they went to 3 bass recently too. So you could actually go back, and there's a number of years where if you extrapolate it out, there's a lot of guys who would have had 30-pound bags, but they didn't. It was a 3 fish limit, which changes how guys fish, and they fish for bigger ones. So we're going back to where they had the 5. January 14th, 2012, South Region Falcon Lake Bass Champs Tournament Trail. Ben, there were 32 bags over 30 pounds.
Wild.
There's an 1121, a 1280, a 1094, a 1040, an 1165, a 1031, an 1156. I don't think there was a single one in that Florida tournament that topped 10 pounds.
Right. So that's what was kind of interesting to me. I didn't see like the big fish results, but I kind of figured it was a lot of 6 to 8 pounders in that Okeechobee tournament.
It took 45.52 to win this event. There were 4 bags over 40.
Yeah, that's pretty
There
wild.
were 32 bags over 30. I got to get to the second page because I did some there were 66 bags over 25. That's a big fish, Ben. You know what a 5-pounder looks like? That's a big fish.
That's
and there
5
were
big fish. That's
yeah.
I mean, 66 bags. Think about how much weight that was in one tournament.
There were 120-pound bags.
That's crazy.
And I would say a dozen 10-plus pounders that came in. That right there, that might be one of the world record.
Yeah, it's got to be up there. And the crazy thing is Falcon's it's a good-sized lake. It doesn't fish that big, though. So, I mean, there was probably guys all over each other still catching them like that.
Yeah. What I know that for a while there at OHIV, there was a YouTube battle as who could have the 5 biggest bass on camera. I think that actually started with the cast to catch by Butch Brown. He had like a 60-pound limit. Like Butch is Butch the king of the massive stringers, I guess, like that out there. He's kind of the OG when it comes to that, I would say.
Yeah.
He was the first one that I remember.
There's not no offense to him. He's had, I'm going to get so much hate for this, but he doesn't have a whole lot of footage of cast to catch to scale out there, and maybe fishing some waters that aren't the most public or accessible for a normal sized boat as well. So yeah, he had a 65-pound limit video where he straight up took them out of the live well and said how big they were. Didn't put any of them on a scale. Didn't show the catching of them. But yeah, he's caught a lot of giant fish over the years.
In that world of the giant fish, the holy grail is cast, hook, catch, weigh on certified scale, able to see the actual weight on the scale with the whole fish. That's the only way to do it legit, right?
Yeah, I mean, as legit as you can get anyway.
Is there a lot of tomfoolery when it comes to the size of 5 fish bags out there, Ben?
There can be, for sure, especially when we start getting into a pissing match about it. Then it kind of gets a little bit funky. But yeah.
I mean, I'd say 2 years ago to last year, I mean, that was all the rage. Who could have the 5 biggest? There were like 6 or 7 dudes that were all like, oh yeah, watch this. Oh yeah, watch this. We were right in the middle of that. That's fun.
Hey, we started it and ended it pretty much.
Yeah. What was your biggest? You had some freak show last year, didn't you? Like 50 something.
Well, the second day we were at Ivy ever that we kind of exposed it. We had like 62 that day.
Yeah. What is that like? 62 on 5.
Well, I had never caught a 10-pounder before that day, and I caught 2 that were almost 13. So it was pretty ridiculous. And we caught a 16. So yeah, it was all right.
What's your biggest derby stringer?
37.
Good Lord. Where was that?
I can't tell you where that was at.
Oh,
no, that was actually a lake in Nebraska way back. Those are all northern strains. But I caught a 11.4 in a tournament at Caney in Louisiana this February.
I know in tournament fishing, you always hear about guys talking about, I hook, I do it. I've done it. I've lost probably the 3 biggest fish I've ever hooked in the opens. But you talk to guys like Kelly Jordan, who we had on recent winner of a invitational, he's done the Lake Fork thing. And it seems like the guys who catch big ones, like, do you get used to it to where like in the open, when you're seeing 6s, 7s, 8s come up and money's on the line, it's way less stressful. You learn how to hook, fight, and land those bigger fish. Whereas a guy like me might hook 2 or 3 fish over 8 pounds in a season. You're doing it every day. Does it get kind of pedestrian, like where you're not absolutely freaking out when you see how big they are?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there is something to that for sure. And I think the biggest thing, I mean, when you just say it simply, like seeing, hooking, landing a fish that size, but it's that one moment once you get, if it's not a topwater bite or if it is a topwater bite, when you set the hook on that fish and it's a different one, that 6, 7+ pound fish up to however big, that a lot of guys that aren't used to it, you see it or you feel it the first time and you freeze or you freak out. And those are the 2 things in that split second that you cannot do. And so I think having the experience of landing and hooking fish that big and fighting them, that's the biggest thing right there. That split second to turn its head and keep it coming is what it's all about.
Say that again, because I watched the Zal Dangerous podcast at the beginning of the year. I had a miserable fish landing year last year in the open. Rick Clunn was on, and he talked about the importance of keeping the hook points moving towards the boat. Is that basically what I just heard you say?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, especially with big baits. I mean, I've fought fish for a long time on a line through before, and I'd hardly ever lose them. With a line through, you can fight them about as long as you freaking want to, but on a big bait or a single hook bait, something that a fish can throw a lot easier, you need to not only really with anything, I don't like to snap set at all anymore, but more of a sweep hook set, keep the bow in the rod and grind them to the boat. And that's something I learned early with some of the big swim bait stuff that really applies to about everything, crankbait fishing, jig fishing, whatever, but especially the big baits.
That's really good stuff. I've consciously have thought, keep the fish moving towards the boat this year. And I've upped my line, even on my spinning rod stuff a little bit, so I can keep that fish moving towards the boat instead of letting them fight and jump and get off. And my execution has been really good this year.
That's
all right.
good.
You want to get into bugs?
Yeah, I suppose we can go down that road.
All right. Well, let's take a real quick break. And when we come back, we'll dive into the 3rd Bassmaster Open EQ of the season, a 62nd place finish for Ben Milliken on a rapidly changing fishery. I don't think I fished an open where the conditions changed so fast in such a short amount of time.
Yeah,
it's
that was
BTL. Yeah, it was wild. It's BTL on a Tuesday. We'll be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Shoreline Boat and RV, dock rash, storm damage, collision repair, that deep scratch or gouge from trying to access that secret creek. Shoreline Boat and RV can get your prized possession back in mint condition and looking good on the water, fast. All repairs are done in-house, so they're able to get your boat or RV back to brand new, quickly. All Shoreline's work comes with a rock-solid warranty. Find out more at shorelineboatandrv.com. Kansas City, Austin, and Tulsa.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Top on Strike King.
So I'm a big guy, a lunker, a 2 sandwich eating kind of man. And I'm behalf of all of those bigger, I gotta say it once and for all, it's bad enough that the fish look smaller in our hands. The last thing we should have to worry about is getting quality outdoor clothing that fits. AVCO, any fish, any water.
All right, welcome back. BTL on a Tuesday. Ben Milliken talking all things Bugs Island, third Bassmaster Open EQ. Quick turnaround. Practice starts this Saturday at Wheeler, but we got a couple days here to digest the past tournament. And Ben off after a fifth and a first, or a fourth and a first, fifth and a first to start the year. You go into Bugs Island in Virginia. What was your thought process? How was your practice? What was the game plan?
Yeah, there was. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't going to try to at least get some of the big bait, big herring eater stuff going, whether that be a multi-jointed swim bait or a big topwater or some type of bigger soft bait. And I mean, it took me a couple hours of the first day to realize that that wasn't happening yet. And looking at the forecast, that unfortunately wasn't going to happen. And so I immediately tried to figure out what phase the fish were in and kind of judge everything by that. I knew that I'd be more comfortable in the cleaner water, which really looking back was something that, I mean, I sampled the whole lake, but I wish that I wouldn't have gotten in my head that I kind of wanted to fish that cleaner water more. But it's just what I'm more comfortable with. It's what I like to fish. I have more confidence when I know that the fish can at least see what I'm throwing at them, and then I can watch how they're reacting or not reacting. So I really wanted to break down as much as I could in practice, and figured out that they seem to be post spawn, or almost all post spawn, with a lot of fry garters. My biggest problem was it seemed like every time I would locate what the females were doing, and I would finally get that clue and get that 3-4 pound bite, and then I could run it a few times and I would catch another one or two more. I'd go back and try to build upon that or duplicate that the next day of practice, and it kept just going away and becoming random. And so I kind of just tried to focus on different ways that I could get more bites, because I started to realize how close in weight a lot of these fish were, which you ended up seeing at the end of the tournament. And so I wanted to, by the end of practice, I was like, I'm just going to put myself in position to get as many bites as possible. And so that's kind of just how practice developed for me. But to get a little more specific, I found a lot of fish in practice. And for anyone that's been to Kerr, Bugs Island, you know that they cut all the trees down, or at least a large majority of them down in the lake, which was really nice for getting around, as opposed to Toledo Bend a couple weeks before. And so that leaves these giant stumps underwater. And so I started targeting a lot of these stumps that were on some of the secondary and main lake points coming out of those spawning pockets. And in practice, I was actually on a pretty strong bite, bumping a spinner bait off of those stumps, or an underspin. And then I could also go and drop shot them off those stumps too. Those were mostly in 8, 10 to 18 feet of water. I couldn't really get bit much deeper than that. And then, so I was good with that, but I saw that there was supposed to rain. I figured that the water was going to come up quite a bit. And so I knew that I also needed a shallow plan, if not as a backup plan, but as my main secondary plan, because I didn't figure the fish were going to make a big movement out deep with that water coming up like it was. The problem was that everyone was faced with also, we didn't have warm rising water. We had cooling rising water, because it got to 40 degrees every night then after that, once the rain blew through. So it kind of ended up being a big kind of random tournament in practice for me because of that. And the same thing happened to me up shallow. I found a really good bluegill bed spawn bite one day in practice, and I had like 16, 17 pounds in a couple hours doing it. And it was in one very specific type of pocket under a specific type of tree that I could figure out. And I literally, the second half of the fourth day of practice and then the fifth day of practice, I burned a tank of gas each of those 2 periods. I ran the entire lake finding these exact pockets like this to try to make that work. And I would kind of stop and fish them after a while. And towards the end of practice, I realized those bigger fish that I was catching around the lake, I would fish the same stuff that looked good, and I would randomly I would catch small ones too. And there was no rhyme or reason for it. It just kind of all went away. And so that's kind of what led me to just be like, all right, I got to catch fish for points in this tournament. I'm going to put myself in position to catch as many bites as possible. And hopefully we can cull a 1.7 or a 1.5 with a 1.7, and then we can cull those 1.7s with 1.9s, and then hopefully we can catch a 3.5 pounder at some point and see where that gets us.
What do you think made the biggest difference? The wind change, the water level change, the water temperature change, or the clarity of the water change? Or was it all the things happening at once that made this a challenging event?
It was probably all of them, but really I think just the water not warming to just kind of keep progressing those fish. You know, once they get into spawn and done spawning, they're wanting some biological or some environmental changes to speed up their biological progression, and they just never got there because the water slowly cooled down. And I don't know, the bait didn't seem to move around a ton. Everything just kind of stayed the same, except the fish just couldn't progress, and they just got pounded in practice and then pounded in the tournament.
Now, the one thing you didn't mention going through it, you mentioned the bluegill spawn, which I completely missed. Did you find or look for a shad spawn at all?
I did, and apparently I didn't spend enough time looking for it because just from our text together, you clearly found a lot more of it going on than I did. And I fished some of those same areas of the lake, except I was more in the back of the pockets flipping some of these types of little cut banks or cuts that I found. And so I'm sure there was some of that going around. I did find one little pocket randomly the last day of practice. There was it was way back actually in that creek that we talked about. I've completely wiped my brain free of Kerr Lake already.
Grassy?
No, the other one.
Panhandle?
Panhandle. Yeah, way in the back of Panhandle, there's a spot where no wind had gotten to it. So there was a mat of pollen, and then it butted up into an awesome tree. And there was 5 bass blowing shad in there onto the pollen mat. Yeah, and I was like, okay. So I threw my frog on top of there, and one was probably 3.5 pounds, comes up and crushes it. And so I shook it off, and I flipped my hog walla in there, and one ate it, and I shook it off. I was like, all right, I guess I'm starting there. So I went there 2 times in the tournament and never got a bite. So yeah, that's about how my tournament went.
The glide bait thing, did you get any bites on the big baits, a line through, a glide bait, a follower, anything in practice? When did you realize that you weren't going to be able to play that game? Pretty early on?
I got some followers. The bigger the glide, the better it seemed like. It just it pulls them better, but I could tell it wasn't going to happen. And they were honestly just eating the damn spinnerbait out deep and stuff and the underspin. So I wasn't going to fight it pretty much. And then in the tournament, actually, the second day, I went to a spot to try to catch a big one. It was this giant boulder that was probably 8 feet tall and probably about 8 feet tall and in diameter too, on this super long tapering clay point that went way out. It's a couple hundred yards from the bank. It was only 8 feet, 10 feet deep. And there was a group of 6 fish behind it. And I had 2 good ones follow my glide all the way to the boat and just not commit to it. But besides that, man, that was it for the big baits.
Wow. Primarily you said spinnerbait on day 1 when it was windy, and then the stumps ended up playing a little bit on day 2 for you. Was day 1 just too windy to get out there and target it? And in my experience, I looked at 3 of them on day 1, 3 of them that I knew there should be a fish on, that throughout practice, I'd be like, gosh, that is the deal. And I looked at 3 of them, and there was no fish on any of them.
Yeah, so I didn't catch any on a spinnerbait, actually. I caught them all. Day 1, I caught them flipping, and then I threw we got a new, it's kind of like the Mag Draft Freestyle, but it's a bigger size whale from 6 Cents. It's a 6.5-inch bait. So I did kind of catch them on a big bait a little bit, but I was throwing that on a beast hook, and I was swimming it through some of the same points with timber and bushes that a lot of the guys were throwing spinnerbaits. I just thought I could get a half-pound bigger bite doing that. And so I did weigh a couple on that, but the rest were flipping day 1. And yeah, it was crazy windy. So that sucked, but also the same experience you had. Went out there on those drop shot and spinnerbait trees like I had been fishing, and they just weren't even there, let alone not biting.
So that was a key adjustment that you made, because you could have tried to grind that deal out all day and sucked.
Yes, that was kind of a big part of my game plan
Yeah.
too, with getting as many bites as possible. A lot of the offshore points with the stumps were right next to a lot of the areas I wanted to flip and fish bushes and stuff too. So I knew I could just bounce
Okay.
in, out, and just try to get as many bites as possible. And I realized pretty quick that the stump thing wasn't going to happen, and I wasn't going to force it.
Going into day 2, then, you knew, I don't know if you knew this, but there's going to be some survival tournaments. Had you changed your mindset to let's go repeat what I did on day 1, or were you trying to freak show them on day 2 to jump into the top 10?
Definitely wasn't trying to freak show them. It was pretty obvious to me how tight everything was going to be. And so I had the exact same game plan: get as many bites as possible. Hopefully I get that same 3.5 pound bite, or if I get lucky, get 2 of them and weigh 14, 15 pounds. But yeah, just try to get as many bites as possible day 2. And it was all the spots where I caught them flipping, which was, I mean, I caught them a bunch of places. I probably caught 15 keepers day 1, but all the places I caught them flipping, it seemed like a lot of the people figured out those type of cuts that I was flipping and fishing, and they were loaded with boats, and the fish were small flipping on day 2. They wouldn't bite, and everything was getting pressure. So I was like, oh man, I really need to figure something out. And I went out to the stumps, fished a couple stump spots that didn't have anything, and then I pulled up on another one, and I finally got a fish that was on one, and he followed. And then I went to another stump and I caught one. And then I kind of started as the late morning into the afternoon progressed. I was a super late boat number last flight. I was able to kind of run with the stump thing because the shallow fish I was fishing for got so beat up. And they were, like we talked about, then I talked to some guys that before launch the second day, kind of helped me. They were talking about how they were all fry garters they thought up shallow.
Yeah, it's freaking crazy on the stumps. You could see it. Austin Cranford's the one who told me about that. And I couldn't figure out why there were, like, every once in a while you'd see one out in the middle of nowhere, but the ones around the stumps, I was like, oh, there's like a little ball of like bait around the stump, and then there's like one fish underneath it. And I was picturing him being like, I'm gonna get that bait. And then Austin was like, oh, you catching them fry garters off the stumps? And I was like, son of a gun, they're freaking fry garters that you're seeing on live scope. Little halo, kind of hazy around that. Yep. And then the fish underneath it. And if you put it through that ball of fry, every single time it'd be a male between 1.5 pounds and 2.5 pounds. And it would come over and just train wreck your drop shot.
Yeah, definitely. It was like smallmouth fishing on boulders, the drop shot kind of. So even if you couldn't see the fish a lot of times, you'd flip in there, and the whole thing would, hump up, and you'd see it spin around and get your bait, which was cool.
I mean, it was aggressive. It was every single one. That's why when I fished 3 on day 1 after 10 minutes, didn't get any bites, scrapped it, put the spinning rods away.
Yep. And I like I said, I have no idea why, but day 2, they got out there and they started biting again, and I was cool with that.
I wonder if it was wind related, or I wonder if there was a change in the current, because I know based on my research those fish are kind of current driven, but I never looked at it to see when they were moving. I wonder if they were moving water, and when they weren't moving water, they roamed, especially with the wind and the overcast. Then they move a little bit of water. It gets sunny. They've got something that breaks that current, negligible current, but breaks that current down there.
Could be, for sure. And that was kind of the cool thing about that boulder at the end of the day that I went and checked. I hadn't been there in the tournament at all, but when I was there in practice, there was fish there and they wouldn't bite. And so I stayed way back. I put my scope out to 120 feet, and I sent that drop shot as far as I could when I pulled up there. And I caught 4 or 5 fish off that one boulder and upgraded twice. And even caught one on a jerkbait there that was upgrade for me. But yeah, it was just nice. All the stuff I kind of had in the back pocket came into play. I just didn't get the 3 to 4 pound bite.
Yeah, and to see how important that was, I would imagine you had a couple days. Did you have all 2s, or did you have like a high 1 a couple of the days?
Both days I had a high 1.
So you had 21:15, finished 62nd, which is still top quarter of the field. Very respectable finish, kept you right where you needed to be. But give you 1 more pound, which isn't even a 3 pounder, just a 2 3/4 pounder, give you 22:15. That jumps you up to 45th. Just 1 pound is that much difference. This is why it's so hard in the opens. There's usually a massive section that is really. Well, my studio door just opened and it had been closed. Not kidding. That's odd. What was I talking about? I mean, like slowly open, and it's not a door that opens.
Wow.
How much weight did you have? 2150. Okay, so I was talking. That shook me, Ben.
Jeez, we're gonna have to go to commercial break.
That shook me. But give you another pound to 2315, which is not out of the realm of possibility. That's 2 more pounds. That's 1 2.5 pounder each day. You're up in 30th place, like 32nd place. It was amazing how close everything was.
Yeah, it seemed like the guys that were up in like the top 15 or 20 really caught them good and smoked everyone. But yeah, when you really look at the numbers, if I would have caught a 4-pound bass, which would have been a 2.2-pound upgrade for me, and that's not out of the realm. A lot of the guys in the top 15 caught a 4-pounder or a 5-pounder even. If I would have caught one of those, I would have been in that top 20-ish range. I think I was 1 pound and 6 ounces from a check, which was wild.
Which seems like nothing, but then when you're out there and fishing, then in this tournament, it also seems like a lot because you're like, man, that's
Exactly.
like 7 calls or a big one.
I mean, it's easy to be like, oh, I was 1 bite away. Well, yeah, so was everyone else.
Yeah. So I got that 1 bite on day 1, and it wasn't by accident, but it was like, I remember, go back, another Rick Clun thing is he's like, when everything's rolling, like there is nothing, like your co-angler gets hung up. Instead of being like, dang, that's going to take me 30 seconds, you're like, ooh, maybe this is the universe telling me that there's a different angle that I can cast to something that I miss while I go up and get a snag. Well, I had found on day 1, to your point about how much a 4-pounder was, I had a good bag on day 1. I only caught 7 fish, but I fished Main Lake between those two, threw a spinnerbait, did Grand Lake and Ozark stuff, scrapped everything that I had, the stumps, the foot, everything. But I had found this one little, probably a 50-yard stretch of bank, and at like 10 a.m. I had one shad follow it back, and I was like, that's a freaking shad spawn. There's got to be a shad spawn if the shad's following it. And I caught a 3 there, a heavy 2, and just a line burner. And I run back up lake, and you know how windy it was, and doesn't feel right. And I'm like, screw it, I'm going back there. There's got to be more fish there if there was a shad there, and I caught 2. And I saw like 10 boats the whole tournament, and the whole lake where I was. I mean, there were some guys running. And I go back, and wouldn't you believe it, I didn't pass a single boat, and there's a guy sitting dead nuts on it, throwing a freaking spinnerbait. And I was by myself, and I was like, you have got to be freaking kidding me. Like, ran in the 3-footers all the way down there, and there's a dude sitting on it, and I knew he had to be catching him because he stayed there. So I came off pad, and I pulled up my map, and I said, I didn't drive 8 miles down here just to see that the guy was fishing where I wanted to and leave. I said, this looks kind of similar to it. It's about a half mile away. So I roll over to it, and it's this long point that's a saddle that leads out to an island. And it's like 8 inches on top. Waves are crashing in. It's frothy. I put my trolling motor down. Trolling motor hits the bottom. I'm like, well, this is crap. Like, I drove over there. Now I feel like I, haphazardly just kind of roll cast a War Eagle spinnerbait over there, and I get 2 cranks in, and there's a boil like this in like 8 to 10 inches of water. And I swear there's a lot of carp up there. You saw all the carp, right? And I figured he was up on top next to a bush, and I rolled it over a carp back. Well, then my line was slack. And by the time I caught up with my line, it was a 4-pounder that had engulfed my spinnerbait in that much water, and a spot that the only reason I was at was because someone was on where I wanted to go. I went crank, 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 boat flipped it. Wire is completely straight. My knot is up by the blades. And I just look at it and went, that was cool.
Yeah,
and that was a key 4-pound bite that I got that really carried me.
Oh, that's huge. I mean, that's the difference right there. And I think when we talk about how important decision making is and like positive mental attitude type stuff, I mean, you could have very easily been like, well, screw it, I'm going to turn back around 8 miles and just go back to where I was catching them. And so, and that would have been fine. Maybe you would have caught a 5-pounder if you did that. You have no idea. But yeah, it's crazy when things are rolling, but to keep your mind open and look for things, especially in a pattern type tournament like that wasn't so much a spot type tournament. It's huge to look at the map and find something similar. I did that the whole tournament too, when I was, everyone was beating stuff up that I was fishing.
Would you say Eufaula and Toledo Bend were more spot tournaments, and this was a go fishing tournament, or did you do that in the first 2? It seems like in the first 2 it was just roll up and whack and sack.
The first one was definitely a spot tournament for me. Eufaula. Okay. I had 3 or 4 schools of fish, and I only fished 2 of them, or 3 of them maybe. But yeah, and Toledo was more of an area where I found a pattern in an area of the lake more so. But yeah, this one was way more of a traditional pattern fishing tournament.
which do you enjoy more? Like if you had to let's say you're going to finish equal. Let's say you're going to finish 10th. Would you rather do it at a spot tournament where I'm going to get there, or would you rather do it in a pattern tournament that you have to grind and make a bunch of decisions throughout the day?
If I was going to finish equal, definitely a pattern tournament. I think you get a lot more satisfaction as a fisherman from being like, oh yeah, I made the right decision. I went over here. The wind was hitting it just right this way. I saw that point. It looked like the point I just caught him on, and I caught one. I think you get a lot more satisfaction.
I had a couple times this past week where I was like, I don't know why I'm in this cove or cut or creek. I don't know why I'm running down it, but I'm running down it at 35 miles an hour. And I'm like, I need to fish that. And I would say 6 or 7 times over the 2 days. I mean, I fished completely brand new water. I scrapped everything, 90% of what I had in practice. I would just stop and catch one, and it'd be a 2-ounce cull, a 3-ounce cull, especially on day 2. Because I started, I mentioned the shad spawn a little bit to you. That same spot where I went back and someone was sitting on, I was boat 22 on the second day. No one tried to get to it. Something in my mind said, I bet there's a shad spawn there. There was like that kind of hay grass, but it was like sponge grass under the water.
Yeah.
Did you find that stuff?
Yeah.
The shad were spawning in that.
Right.
And I had a limit in 12 minutes on day 2.
That's fun.
But it only weighed like 7.5 pounds. And I counted, I made 5 decisions over the course of the day. And every single decision that I made resulted in culling. Not immediately, but whether I went in the back and flipped for 3 hours, culled up, whether I decided to stop. Then with 5 minutes left, I rolled back to the ramp thinking there might be some release fish there. And there's a little cutout right before you go into the off limits on that bluff on the right-hand side. Hadn't caught a fish on a spinnerbait in like 3 hours. Hadn't thrown it. I'd been flipping. Roll a spinnerbait up there, a little piece of wood. I tell my I said, I swear one just rolled on it. Like my blade stopped, and I look and there's a boil. And I'm like, dang, that would have been a hell of a call in the last. And this rarely happens on a spinnerbait. You know how nasty that water was up there. Roll it back out, crank it twice, and a 3 eats it. And it comes up, mouth open. And I mean, I do the thing. I winch, boat flip. Cole's a 167.
Yeah, and I think you said it right there. People listening can't quite put into perspective. The water around the ramp did not look good. It was trash. Chocolate milk. There was literal trash blowing in everywhere. So that's crazy.
I talked to another angler who did the same thing. He caught one over 2 there. And then Scanlon was right by the ramp as well on the second and third day. That was a weird off limit. So this is what I learned on that, Ben. Did you fully understand exactly where the off limits were for this tournament?
I didn't really care because I knew I wasn't going to fish there. So I didn't even look at it, honestly.
Because I didn't realize that you could go right after you checked in, go under the little bridge behind, and it opened up and you could fish back there. Yeah, I didn't I just assumed, hey, that whole thing's off limits, and the map at the meeting kind of cut off a little bit. So my co-angler on day 2 even was like, I bet that creek's good. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to risk it. I was like, I think I got enough for a check and great points. He's like, no, you can go back there. And I was like, I'm not going to do it. And sure enough, a couple guys whacked him back there. And guys whacked him in that muddy water right there too.
Interesting. Like I said, something I wish I probably would have expanded on a little bit more. And that's just something with experience I'm going to have to get better at understanding where to stop on the way in, because I've had a couple days where I've come in now probably 10 minutes early that I need to make a few more casts. Yeah,
that's one of the biggest things about the tournaments is time management.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Is that something that I know you fish tournaments and stuff, but it's been a while since you fished like that. Is that something that you found yourself struggling with or thinking of making, I see Bobby Lane, bro, 37. I mean, when his check-in is, the guy's maximizing his time. I always seem to be 15 minutes early when I get back. I just don't have the balls to wait until that 1 or 2 minutes, which is an extra 50, 60 casts.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I've been in position this year. I knew at Toledo I was in a really good position to win, and so I came in early. This one, I was just like you. I was like, if I am late and it costs me a pound or 2 pounds, that's going to be 50, 60 points. And so, again, I was paranoid, like, I'm not coming in. But, I mean, if we get to a point where you make a top 10, you're 9th place, you have 4 fish in the live well, and you have a chance at a big one or whatever, yeah, you're going to push it then. So I think it's all based on the situation, too.
All right, you went from, I would feel like a pretty comfortable position to where you're 20 points outside of the 9th spot. It's amazing to me. There's a group of guys that have stroked him in the first 3 without a single weak link in their chain.
Definitely. I figured it was going to be that way after the first 2. I didn't know it would be this tight, going into the season, but we got a lot of separators coming up too. I think Wheeler, I don't know if you want to talk much about Wheeler, but I think it's a great lake. It's people are going to catch a lot of great fish. It's going to be some big bags, but it's really going to screw some people, I think, with how small it fishes or it's going to fish. And I think some guys that maybe should have had good tournaments aren't going to have good tournaments because they couldn't get on their stuff because of the boat number. So it'll be one of those type tournaments that'll again be one that you're really going to have to maximize.
Wheeler is the one that I'm probably the most optimistic about, but most scared of. Never fished there. Covered a Elite Series event there or something. I think there's a couple things you could do. I don't have it. I mean, I'm just rolling in, trying to get a freaking idea of the place. And I think you can follow the smallmouth path. You can follow a shad spawn path, the grass path, the Decatur Flats path. Like there's 5 or 6 things that everybody knows about, but there's also some needle in the haystack spots out there that you roll up on and you can look like a rock star pretty quick from what I've understood in the tournaments that I've covered. And you could be watching someone do some damage while you're in the triple digits.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those spots where it's going to happen like that are probably because they got pushed off of somewhere else that looked a little sexier in practice. Or, I've heard that there's several 100+ boat tournaments these last few weekends too. So yeah, it's going to be a cool tournament. I can't say that I'm not excited for it because there's a lot of big fish. There's big smallies. I love current, river type fishing like that. But I've never been there either. I've barely fished any Tennessee River lakes. And so it's going to be fun. It can be interesting.
Do you think there's something to be said for going into a fishery that you're not familiar with, fishing well and making good decisions? You've obviously made good decisions the first 3 events. Talk about the confidence that gives you knowing, hey, I might know not exactly how this is going down, but I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah, it definitely gives you confidence. And just like if I made 1 or 2 wrong decisions and was in 120th in points, it would also shake my confidence as well. Like maybe I'm not going to do the right thing. So it goes both ways. And you know how it is with fishing. Your confidence can change by the damn minute. It seems like you just have to control that. So 4.5 days of practice is a long time, especially on a place like that. That I think is going to fish pretty small, but who knows? We're just going to have to see what gets found and kind of move around people that are on stuff.
You still having fun? Or are you feeling a little bit of pressure now?
Oh, I'm having a great time. I'm definitely feeling pressure, but I felt that from the start. Seems like from the first day of practice. And since I signed up, I felt pressure, but yeah, nothing crazy.
Because you're rolling what? You got 2 cameramen?
Just 1.
And your family?
Yeah, my family's there. Yeah, so.
And you're doing the videos and you were doing it regardless of whether you're 180th for 9 of them or whether you were 8th for 9 of them.
Yeah, for sure.
When we come back, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, like I said, you're a third of the way through the season now. I want to get your thoughts on the reception that you've received from the hardcore tournament fishing community and the press and the accolades that you've gotten. If it was kind of what you expected, if it was above and beyond that, but I want to dive into that real quick in our final segment, if you're good with that, Ben.
Definitely. Let's do it.
All right. BTL on a Tuesday, May 9th, Bassmaster Open EQ angler, Ben Milliken. We'll be back right after this.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
The great thing about the new Sensation soft plastics from Big Bite Baits, heavily scented, super soft, buoyant, comes in 7 great new shapes. I've got a couple of them of my signature series, the cliffhanger worm and the ramtail craw. Great for a flipping jig, football jig, swim jig, all that. Several other great shapes. Really excited about it. We've worked over the last year, catches fish all over the country, and I think it's going to catch fish for people everywhere you try it.
The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD.
I'm the kind of guy that never leaves the house without a pocket knife, and Gamakatsu's come out with the EDC series of knives. EDC stands for everyday carry, so whether you're on the water or off, you can always have it with you. The best thing about it to me is that assisted open feature. With this D2 blade, you've got it right here at your fingertips, so if you can't find your scissors, you need to cut a knot, you need to cut your braid, you've always got it. Make sure you check it out. Never leave home without your Gamakatsu EDC knife.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
Having confidence in your tackle while on the water is one of the main things to success, in my opinion. In the last couple of years with Denali, I've had just that. From anything from spinning rods, casting rods, tungsten products, even now to casting and spinning reels, I have the confidence to go out there and get the job done and know that all my equipment is going to handle it and do it just the way I want it. The thing about Denali is you've got great quality products at a great price point, so make sure you check them out.
All right, wrapping things up here. Ben Milliken, Bassmaster Open's EQ angler. There's a whole bunch of people now that just know you as a tournament angler for the past month and a half that haven't watched any of your videos. They don't do the YouTube thing, and they're like, dude, where did this guy come from? He's pretty damn good at fishing tournaments. That's got to feel good.
Yeah, man. It's been awesome. I love it. I had a lot of success in the area in the Midwest I was from, but smaller tournaments, and so it's cool to see it kind of all come together at this level.
Are you surprised at how big of waves you have made in the industry, in the tournament industry so far?
Yeah, really I am. I never could have expected to win at Toledo, but then I guess it hasn't really set in for me. Just as a competitor, all I can think about is the next one in this 9 tournament schedule, but hasn't really set in, I guess, what I accomplished those first 2 events, especially the second one with you and Dave talking about how impactful that win was, that open win. So it's really cool. It's been, we said we were going to talk about this, but the reception and the way I've been treated by everyone has been extremely positive. There's still been some people, some rumblings I've heard from pro anglers, or I guess you can't even say pro anglers, people in the industry, trying to shoot down what I've done so far. But hopefully we'll have more chances to prove them wrong than prove them right.
And I would like to say this, that I am not jumping on the bandwagon. We had planned on doing something at or after every tournament way before the season even started, correct?
We did do that, but Matt, I don't think you probably would have deleted my number if I got like 216th all 3 tournaments.
No, but like when we do like random texts, I'll be honest. So I had a couple really good days of practice at Bugs. Like one of the days I had like 4 for 17 the last day.
Deal.
different spots. And then the first day had a really good day offshore and stuff. And I was like, dude, I hope Milliken texts me. Because the first two, you've been like, yo, what do you think? And I'm like, I'm freaking struggling, man. You? I got him. Like, how good? Like, giant schools. How do you know? Well, I made 3 casts. I caught a 10, an 8, and a 7. How many schools you got? 4. If no one else finds them, I'll be. And you did it. And I mean, it frustrated the hell out of him. Kind of spun me out a little bit. So this one, I knew it wasn't your wheelhouse. Like I could tell. I chucked some stuff around, and I could tell it wasn't going to be a big bait deal. Changing conditions, rising water, cooling water, mud coming down, a lot of smaller fish hit it. I was like, God, I hope Ben texts me, because I wasn't going to text you. And you said, well, what do you think? I said, this place is heaven. And I'm in the boat when I said that. I just laughing my butt off. You're like, no, I can only catch 10 pounds a day. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So I couldn't wait for that text so I could turn the tables and be like, oh, yeah, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's freaking easy out here, man. Yeah, I'm smashing them.
That's fantastic. I'll have to keep that in mind for our future pre-tournament conversations, Matt.
No. I mean, listen, I was dead honest with you, and you've been honest with me. We don't share any information, spots, anything. The only thing that we share is easy, tough, giants, not giants, just overall generals, which so far you've been absolutely spot on. And so have I. You know, at Toledo, I let you know that I was probably going to suck.
Yeah, I mean, we have been pretty spot on. It's kind of funny. It's funny how you always hear people talk about, oh, I had the worst practice of my life, and then they win the damn tournament or they get a top 5. I don't even understand how that's possible half the time. But maybe it's different on like the elite level than it is in the open level, where you
No,
really
I've done it. It's psychological, man. It's a psychology thing. It's a deal called inattentional blindness. It's where you only. I've gone through this a million times, so we'll lose viewers because they're like, "Oh, not as psychological analysis on what happens, deal." But it's called inattentional blindness. It's a real thing. It's where your brain, once you determine what you feel like is important, you have all these external factors coming in. That's the only thing you focus on, and everything else you deem as unimportant and not a threat to your life, you don't even notice. So that's how you can go suck at a tournament and you flip docks the whole time. And a guy goes down riprap right next to the dock and catches 18 pounds. And you're like, how in the hell did I not go down the riprap with the crankbait? Well, you in your mind had decided the important thing to you was dock corners with a jig or whatever, because you had a great practice. So you're ruling out, you're not even capable of seeing any of this stuff. You're visually incapable of seeing it because your brain that has to take in so much information to determine that it's not valuable to your livelihood or success. When you have a crappy practice, everything is still open because you're not keying on anything specific. So you're more likely to fish the conditions. You're more likely to practice more in different things. So when you get a clue or a cue during that tournament day, you're more likely to, as Iconelli said, fish the moment. You're more likely to roll with what is actually happening, which in my opinion is why so many guys who have average or below average practices really dial it in the tournament.
Makes sense for sure. But I think there's also the other set of things where it's like you practice and you don't catch them good, but you found a group of fish on a point and you made a cast and got a bite and shook it off. And you're like, okay, I'm going to leave it because it was the last day of practice or whatever. And the rest of your practice went terrible. And so you're like, oh, they're probably small ones too. And then you come back in the tournament and you catch 22 pounds off the point, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think it could go both ways, but what you're saying definitely plays to exactly what the idea of dock talk is. It's how people get hurt from getting information, but just the simple shutting out what's actually happening instead of what should be happening.
Information and gathering information does not guarantee success. There is an art to deciphering information and then applying it, whether it is information that has legally been given to you, information that you have gathered on your own on the water, information that you have gathered through research on the internet. There are certain anglers that thrive on deciphering information, not picking out the red herrings or the ones that lead them down the dead end paths, and understanding the valuable bits of information and turning that into their own tournament. That is an art unto itself.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of been art in deciphering BS that we all kind of, as we grow as anglers, figure out. Just gathering basic information about fishing a Texas rig, or what's the best type of fishing line to use. Growing up, is it because that pro writing the article is trying to promote a sponsor and talk about his sponsor's bait, or is it a legitimate article and that bait or line or technique or whatever, that spot, the way he's fishing is actually juice? And that's it's the game we've been playing forever.
There's so many different types of information that, and I would just say, this is just me speaking of how I typically go about it. So every Bassmaster Open, and you can work as hard as you want or not, you're going to have 5 different types of information. You're going to have information. You're going to have your buddies who you trust, who have experience on that lake. That might be in the form of some waypoints, some general areas, some patterns, some baits. Then you're going to have outside information that might be like, hey man, I'm a big fan of you, or a big fan of the show. I fish the lake. If you want to know anything, let me know. Now, you don't know how trustworthy that information is, but it is also, information that you can garner. Then you're going to have the third type is the information, the research that you do, watching old Bassmasters, looking at tournament results, reading BFL stuff. That is out there. But then you have to discern, is that the classic Jason Christie spinner bait in the mid lake on Grand pattern, where it's like, oh, it's weird, this guy's won 19 tournaments doing the exact same thing on the exact same bait in the exact same part of the lake, and it's just a generalization? Or is that valuable? Then you've got the information that you determine while you're on the water, that you're going through 100% yourself. And then you have the post-practice information, which is all the other guys in the tournament and the doc talk. In my opinion, those are the 5 types of information. And I utilize all 5 of those things to try to come up with the best game plan. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But I think you can kind of get a little bit of system to glean the valuable parts of information out of each one of those 5.
Yeah, that's oh man, there's a lot there, and that's a really good way to break all that down. And then you got to think about those 5 types of information don't matter as much as what you saw in your first cast that tournament day and how the fish reacted or did not react to your bait. Those 5 types of information are like 10% of the 100% puzzle, which is you actually going out and figuring it out in the moment.
It is. So I thought it was interesting. You keyed on those stumps with a underspin and a spinner bait and a swim bait, right?
Yep.
Well, the very first stop that I made on the lake, running down the lake, I've got my C-map pulled up and I'm like, that looks cool. And I roll over and I see a stump. Well, I've got a polluted Dawn finesse worm on a drop shot. It's what I had on at Toledo Bend. Picked it up, pitched it out, got a bite on it. Guess what? That's what I decided to throw on the stumps for the whole rest of that day of practice and had tied on for the tournament. What if I had picked up something different? Did I find a bait that they ate the best, or was it just what I happened to pick up? You're absolutely right, though. It was a 3.5 pounder on my second or third cast on the first day of practice. And immediately in my mind, I went, this is the worm. It's got to be a drop shot. It's got to, but you do the same thing with an underspin and you're like, dude, you got to bump an underspin off of these exact same stumps. It's very different how you can reach the same conclusion, but on different baits, and then keep your mind open to changes.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's the crazy thing about that frustrated me so much in this tournament was you should have had fish progressing past the fry garter stage, progressing out of the spot phase. Should have been moving out there, and just the cooling water, the rising water, the muddying water, and the wind just didn't allow for that to happen, which is how it goes.
All right, Ben, my biggest regret of the year was I totally forgot to order one of your custom whiskey bottles. I even told you I was going to. I'm assuming they're gone.
They are gone. We might have some more coming in November, December timeframe, but yeah, the
Okay.
first cask is sold out and gone.
I got you. What else you got? Can people buy all the 402 stuff and all that?
They can, yeah. That's at sixcensefishing.com. All of my merch is on their website. So
All right. And then when is this derby coming out in its entirety on the YouTube?
hoping for the practice video to be out today. I think we're making all 4.5 days into one video, and then hopefully day 1 Thursday, day 2 Sunday.
I like it. Anything else?
I think that's it, man. You ready to go for Wheeler?
No, no, I'm not.
Me either. I'm not
I'm
ready.
a little stressed out over it. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, you got 60 hours of practice to figure something out, right?
I just got to figure out. I think 15 to 16 a day keeps you up there in that top 50, 60.
Might be good, actually. 15 to 16 a day might be good there if it gets just completely trashed.
Dude, there's so many guys from Alabama in it, and there's so much history on that lake. Yeah, I'm a little stressed out over Wheeler. But then we go to Eufaula. Love that. St. Lawrence River. Love that. Watts Bar. Sign me up for that grinder. Lake of the Ozarks. Really like that. And then
Grinder.
It comes down to Florida. And at least you're on a fishery where you know you can try to go grind out 10 to 12 pounds to keep you up there, or you can just pick up the big stick and say, hey, I need 25 a day, and you can actually put yourself in position to do that. So
yeah, cool schedule. We got a lot.
What about you? What are your thoughts on all of them? Wheeler, we talked about. Eufaula, Oklahoma.
Pretty much the same thing. Eufaula makes me nervous. I've never been there, and it's huge, and I know there's a lot of different stuff that goes down there, and my baby's due like that weekday. So,
I didn't know you were having another baby.
Yeah, we got another one on the way.
Congratulations.
You clearly hadn't seen my wife walking around.
No, I've seen you guys walking around, but I just didn't notice.
Yeah, we haven't made it too public. We just kind of keep to ourselves with that. We don't really think it needs to be super, I don't know. We don't make a lot of baby posts and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, so that's all happening that week. And so we're not really sure what's going to be happening, but at least we're only 6 hours away from home there. But yeah, so that one's making me probably the most nervous out of the rest of them, I would say.
Is there a chance you'd skip it, or have you guys had that talk where you're like, hey, you know what? This could lead to college fund stuff. So in the long run, we've already had one.
Well, I got to fish it to fish the Classic.
Yeah.
So that sucks that I won the Toledo one out of the first two because that's the same division. But it's going to probably be a C-section at least, so a little bit more scheduled. Hopefully, we will see.
All right. And then St. Lawrence River, are you going to show people your smallmouth acuity? I know you came out with a series of videos before about that. So,
yeah, I mean, we'll catch some smallies there. That's another place I've spent like 3 hours total fishing that river when I was up there, and it'll be interesting with the lake off limits. A lot of people don't like that. I kind of like it. It makes it kind of more interesting. You probably shouldn't be judged in a tournament based on if you can or can't run 80 miles.
Yeah.
So making it more of a level playing field is cool. And then after that, we got 2 big grinders.
Dude, the season is going to be made and lost September 8th through September 23rd. The back-to-back events, Watts Bar and Lake of the Ozarks. That right there. Those are the 2 events for the 50 guys that still have a shot when we get to that part. That's going to be the grinder. Like, you'll look back on that 5 years from now and remember that if you make it through it, or look back on it and say, dang, that's where I stumbled. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the field as a whole.
100%, man. That's going to be the same as this Bugs Island tournament with tight weights, not the biggest fish. I think Ozarks is going to be just as tough as Watts. It's just the fish are bigger, but it's going to be freaking grind that time of year. Yeah, you're exactly right there. And then, I mean, really, it's cool how it sets up, because once you think that you're finally through all that, then we go to freaking Florida, where who knows what happens there. Totally different. It's almost like fishing for a different species. And so, yeah, what a cool way to end the year, and a cool way of these big fish type derbies. And then we mixed in an East Coast grinder one, and now we're going back to Wheeler, where it's maybe a big fish and small A's. Then we do a true smallmouth current tournament, and then we got those. So it's really cool.
Bass did a good job on it. Like, it's not the most sexiest schedule, but it's a very solid schedule that I think is going to get the 9 best.
100%, man.
All right, Ben. I greatly appreciate it. Like I said, you're a busy man. We're in between tournaments. We only have like 4 or 5 days to do this. So for you taking an hour out of your day to jump on BTL is very much appreciated.
No, I appreciate you having me on. We'll hopefully go whack him at Wheeler.
And then I'll talk to you after Wheeler.
Deal.
All right. See you, Ben.
We'll see you, bud.
That was Ben Milliken, currently sitting in 5th in the Bassmaster Open EQ standings. Great show tomorrow. Scott Palmer, owner of the Bass Tank, on to talk about some stuff that's been going on at the Bass Tank, what they have coming up, some exciting stuff there. And then in the second half of the show, BPT angler Josh Bertrand, one of my buddies and one of the truly good guys out there on either the Elite Series or the BPT, will jump on and talk. And then day 4 with the man Frank Scalish, and then I'm headed to Wheeler. So that's all we got for today. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Later.